You know, I've often wondered if there's a Guinness World Record for the most passive-aggressive act of suburban warfare. If there is, I think my former HOA president, a woman we'll call Brenda, might just have clinched it. 5. Industrial. Shipping. Containers. That's what I woke up to one Tuesday morning, forming an impassable steel barricade across what she thought was just my farm's driveway. Oh, Brenda, if only you'd done your homework. What's up, everyone? Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because you are not going to believe this story of how a petty tyrant's attempt to landlock my small agricultural operation spectacularly backfired. We tired, thanks to a little thing called due diligence and a career in urban planning. I'd bought the 10-acre parcel about 2 years prior. It was on the edge of a sprawling, newer development, the kind with names like Whispering Pines Estates, despite a distinct lack of pines and an abundance of covenants. My property was an older, grandfathered-in plot, a little slice of pre-suburban history, complete with an old farmhouse, a sturdy barn, and, crucially, access via a gravel road that T-boned into the main asphalt artery of Whispering Pines. This gravel road, let's call it Heritage Lane, wasn't just my driveway. It was an established access easement that predated the entire HOA by about 70 years, leading up to my actual private driveway which branched off it. I'd chosen the place for its potential, its quiet, and the fact that, according to every deed, survey, and title search, my access was ironclad. I'm an urban planner by trade, you see. Details are kind of my thing. I'd envisioned a small organic vegetable operation, maybe some chickens, a couple of rescue donkeys, peaceful, productive. Brenda, however, was not a fan of peace or productivity unless it was her own. She was the self-appointed queen of Whispering Pines, ruling the HOA with an iron fist and a wardrobe that screamed, "Discount luxury cruise." Picture this. A woman whose permatan seemed to deepen with every perceived slight, usually found patrolling the neighborhood in a golf cart that was, I swear, louder than my tractor. Her hair was a helmet of blonde ambition, and her voice carried the nasal authority of someone who's never been told no by anyone she wasn't paying. Her official vehicle was a gleaming black Escalade, so meticulously detailed you could see your own horrified reflection in its bumper as she tailgated you for going the posted 25 miles per hour. The trouble started subtly. A passive-aggressive note about the length of my grass near Heritage Lane, not even on my property proper, but along the easement I meticulously maintained. Then came a complaint, delivered via official HOA letterhead, printed slightly crooked, about the unsightliness of my compost bins, which were a good 100 yards from Heritage Lane and completely invisible unless you were trespassing with binoculars. I, being a fan of quiet enjoyment and adherence to actual rules, checked the CCRs. Nothing about compost bins on private property. I sent a polite, professionally worded letter back, referencing the relevant sections, or lack thereof, and reminding them of the boundaries of their jurisdiction. This, I suspect, was my first mistake, using logic. Brenda, it turned out, didn't operate on logic. She operated on ego. The complaints escalated. My occasional trips down Heritage Lane with my pickup truck, perhaps carrying feed or tools, were suddenly excessive commercial traffic. She'd personally flag me down, Escalade blocking the narrow lane, to inform me that Heritage Lane was for dainty residential vehicles only, not for farm implements. I'd politely point to my deeded easement, a document as old as her grandmother. She'd sniff, her nostrils flaring like a thoroughbred sensing a particularly offensive peasant. "We'll see about that," she'd invariably say, a promise that dripped with thinly veiled menace. I consulted my lawyer, a dry-witted fellow named Tom who'd seen his share of HOA shenanigans. "Keep meticulous records," he advised. "Document everything. These types thrive on bluster and intimidation." So, I did. Every note, every conversation, summarized and dated, every sighting of Brenda lurking near my property line went into a file. I even installed a discreet security camera overlooking Heritage Lane and my property entrance, just in case. Then came the letter. Not just a complaint, but a formal cease and desist from the HOA's legal counsel, a firm I later discovered specialized in ambulance chasing and writing threatening letters for people who couldn't spell tort. It demanded I immediately stop using Heritage Lane for any access related to my agricultural pursuits, citing that the lane was HOA common property and that my easement was revocable at the HOA's discretion due to nuisance. It was, legally speaking, utter nonsense. My easement was deeded, recorded, and as permanent as the ground it was paved on, but it was clear Brenda was escalating. I had Tom draft a robust response, citing property law, the specific language of my deed, and a polite invitation for their lawyer to attend a basic seminar on real estate jurisprudence. I thought that might give Brenda pause. Perhaps she'd consult a competent lawyer. I underestimated her boundless confidence in her own ignorance. A week later, on that fateful Tuesday, I went to drive out for my morning coffee and supplies. And there they were, 5 of them. Hulking, corrugated steel boxes, probably acquired from some port auction, each at least 40 feet long. They were parked end to end, completely, utterly, and unequivocally blocking Heritage Lane. My access to the outside world, and the outside world's access to my farm, was severed by roughly 200 feet of rust-streaked Chinese steel. My first thought wasn't even anger. It was a sort of stunned admiration for the sheer audacity, the sheer theatricality of it. My second thought was, game on, Brenda. You have no idea who you're dealing with. My urban planning brain, the part of me that sees cities not as collections of buildings, but as interconnected systems of rules, infrastructure, and human behavior, began to whir. She thought she was blocking a driveway. She was about to find out she'd blocked something far more critical to her own little empire. The initial shock of seeing those 5 colossal metal middle fingers arranged across Heritage Lane quickly morphed into a cold, methodical fury. My farm wasn't just a hobby, it was rapidly becoming my livelihood. I had perishable goods, orders to fill, and a very tight schedule for spring planting. Being landlocked was not an option. My first call, naturally, was to the non-emergency police line. A weary-sounding officer eventually arrived, took one look at the containers, another at my property line stakes, and sighed. Civil matter, ma'am. That road, if it's an easement, means you gotta take 'em to court to get 'em moved if they won't do it voluntarily. He did, however, kindly ticket Brenda's Escalade, which she'd brazenly parked right in front of the containers, practically posing with them like a hunter with a prize kill. A small, unsatisfying victory. Next, I tried the direct approach. I walked over to the HOA Community Center, a small converted model home that served as their office, situated somewhat inconveniently at the far end of the development. Brenda was there, holding court with 2 of her board member acolytes, a nervous-looking woman named Carol who seemed perpetually on the verge of tears, and a beefy, red-faced man named Gary, who clearly thought Brenda's every utterance was gospel. They were all sipping coffee from mugs emblazoned with Whispering Pines excellence in governance. The irony was thicker than the cheap creamer they were using. Brenda, I began, keeping my voice as even as possible, you've blocked my legal access. Those containers need to be moved, today. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes, which were narrowed with smug satisfaction. Oh, those containers? Protective measures, dear. Heritage Lane is HOA common property, and we've decided to restrict access to prevent further damage from your heavy equipment. She gestured vaguely, as if my sensible pickup truck was a rampaging monster truck. It's a deeded easement, Brenda, and you know it. This is illegal obstruction. Gary puffed out his chest. The HOA board voted. It's official. We're protecting community assets. Carol just stared at her styrofoam cup. And how exactly, I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Do you intend to access your own office now, Brenda? She blinked, a flicker of something. Confusion, crossing her face before the smug mask slammed back down. We have perfectly adequate access, thank you very much. Don't you worry your little farmer head about us. She then gestured towards a narrow strip of grass that ran alongside the community center, leading precariously towards a back road. It was clearly just lawn, not a driveway. Now if you'll excuse us, we have important HOA business to attend to. I left, but not before taking copious photos of the containers, their precise placement, and Brenda's Escalade still proudly parked like a sentinel of stupidity. Back at my farmhouse, the urban planner in me took over. This wasn't just about an easement anymore. This was about the systemic abuse of power by someone who clearly hadn't bothered with a shred of due diligence. My office, usually dedicated to regional transit plans or zoning code analysis, transformed into a war room. First, The deeds and easement documents. I'd reviewed them when I bought the place, of course, but now I scrutinized them with the intensity of a Talmudic scholar. The easement for Heritage Lane was, as I remembered, crystal clear. A perpetual, non-exclusive easement for ingress and egress for all purposes serving Parcel X, my farm, over and across the described roadway. Non-exclusive, all purposes, perpetual. No mention of HOA authority to obstruct or revoke. Check. Next, the HOA's covenants, conditions, and restrictions, their sacred text. I read all 150 pages of densely packed legalese. Plenty of rules about lawn gnomes and trash can placement, but absolutely nothing granting the board the unilateral authority to physically barricade a deeded easement, especially one serving a property outside their direct membership purview for that specific access. Another check. Then the real deep dive, county records. I pulled up the original plat maps for the entire Whispering Pines development and my older surrounding parcels. This is where things got very interesting. Heritage Lane, it turned out, wasn't just an easement created for my farm. On the original county surveyor maps from the 1940s, it was platted as a public road stub, intended to connect to a future county road that was never built. While it had devolved into de facto private use serving my farm, and one or two other old lots before Whispering Pines was even a gleam in a developer's eye, its underlying legal status was murkier and potentially more public than Brenda could ever imagine. But here was the kicker, the beautiful, ironic chef's kiss moment. I cross-referenced the parcel number for the HOA's own office building, that little converted model home. And there it was, clear as day on the official county plat map. The only platted, legal access to the HOA office parcel was, drumroll please, Heritage Lane. The very same Heritage Lane currently obstructed by 5 monuments to Brenda's arrogance, their perfectly adequate access across the lawn. Not a platted driveway, not an easement. Just them, driving over common area landscaping, likely a violation of their own damn rules about vehicle traffic on non-paved surfaces. A slow smile spread across my face. Brenda hadn't just shot herself in the foot, she'd taken a bazooka to her entire leg. She thought she was cutting me off. In reality, she'd just legally landlocked her own seat of power. I called Tom, my lawyer. Tom, I said, trying to keep the glee out of my voice, I think I've found something rather delicious. I laid out my findings. The public road stub history, the non-exclusive nature of the easement, and most importantly, the HOA office's sole legal access point. Tom was silent for a moment, then let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be, he said. She really stepped in it, didn't she? This isn't just about your access anymore. This is about their access. My plan began to form, not just to get the containers moved, but to ensure this kind of overreach could never happen again, and to use Brenda's own blunder to solidify my rights permanently. I also started making calls to a few sympathetic neighbors in Whispering Pines, people who had privately grumbled about Brenda's reign of terror for years but were too afraid to speak up. One of them, a retired engineer named Dave, had a long memory of the area's development. That road was always supposed to go through, he told me. Old Man Hemlock, the original farmer who owned my land, used to raise Cain about the county promising and never delivering. This historical context was gold. The pieces were falling into place. Brenda thought she was playing checkers. She had no idea I was setting up a chessboard where her king was already in check. Armed with meticulously organized evidence, highlighted plat maps, copies of deeds, relevant sections of the CCR's photographs, and even Dave's anecdotal history, the next step was to formally notify the HOA of their rather spectacular blunder. Tom drafted a letter that was a masterpiece of polite but firm legal devastation. It wasn't a request, it was a notification of fact. The letter, sent via certified mail with return receipt requested to Brenda personally and to each HOA board member, laid it out in excruciating detail. First, it reiterated my undeniable right to use Heritage Lane based on the perpetual, non-exclusive easement, and cited relevant case law regarding illegal obstruction of such easements. It demanded the immediate removal of the 5 shipping containers, setting a deadline of 72 hours. It also included a bill for the estimated cost of my farm's disruption for each day the access remained blocked, along with a stern warning about escalating damages. But the real stinger was the second part. With chilling precision, Tom's letter, supported by copies of the county plat maps I'd uncovered, pointed out that by obstructing Heritage Lane, the HOA had, in fact, severed the sole legal, platted access to their own office building, Parcel 23B, Whispering Pines Community Center. It politely inquired as to how they intended to conduct official HOA business, receive mail, or allow access for emergency services to their own premises now that they had effectively landlocked themselves. It even included a subtle reference to county zoning ordinances regarding maintaining legal access to commercial and community structures. There was no mention of their little grass track shortcut. We were sticking to the legally defined realities. The silence that followed the delivery of that letter was profound, for about 48 hours anyway. I imagined Brenda receiving it, her permatan probably paling a shade or two as she, or hopefully, the HOA's slightly less incompetent than previously assumed lawyer, processed the implications. The 72-hour deadline was approaching. I half expected to see a flurry of activity, a hasty retreat. Instead, on the morning of the third day, I received an email, not from their lawyer, but from Brenda herself, caning the board. It was a masterpiece of blustering denial. "Dear my name," it began, dripping with condescension. "We are in receipt of your interesting correspondence. The HOA board stands by its decision to protect community assets. Heritage Lane is under HOA control, and its current restricted status will remain. As for our office, we have multiple points of access, and your concern, while touching, is entirely misplaced. We suggest you focus on finding an alternative route for your farm activities, perhaps one more suited to its industrial nature." No mention of the plat maps, no acknowledgement of the legal points, just pure, unadulterated arrogance. She was doubling down. Gary, the beefy board member, even replied, all with a terse, "Well said, Brenda, we won't be bullied." Carol, predictably, remained silent. This was even better than I'd hoped. Her written denial, her insistence on their multiple points of access, which I knew was a lie regarding legal access, was now documented. My urban planner brain went into overdrive. If she wouldn't remove the containers, and if she was going to insist on this fantasy about her office access, then it was time to take the fight beyond just demanding the containers be moved. It was time to make Heritage Lane's true status so undeniably clear, so officially recognized, that Brenda's little kingdom would have to abide by actual laws, not her whims. I immediately forwarded Brenda's email to Tom. "She's not backing down," I wrote. "She's actually put it in writing that they have other access, which we know is false for legal platted access. What's our next move to really turn the screws?" Tom called me back within the hour. "She's an idiot," he said with a distinct lack of surprise. "Okay, phase 2, we don't just sue for removal and damages anymore. We petition the county." And this is where my professional background became the ace up my sleeve. Most people fighting an HOA are dealing with unfamiliar territory. I, however, navigated county planning departments, zoning boards, and land use regulations for a living. "Petition for what, specifically?" I asked, though I had a good idea. "Official clarification and affirmation of Heritage Lane's status," Tom explained. "Given its history as a platted public road stub, and its current function as access to multiple parcels, yours and, critically, theirs, we petition the county planning department or even the board of supervisors to formally recognize it as, at minimum, a designated shared private road with defined access rights for all abutting properties, or explore its original public dedication. We'll highlight the HOA's illegal obstruction and the fact that they've cut off access to their own facilities, creating a potential public safety issue if emergency vehicles can't reach them via a proper road." The beauty of this was that it would take the matter out of a purely civil lawsuit between me and the HOA and elevate it to a matter of public record and county oversight. It would force the county to look at the historical plats, the current use, and the HOA's actions. And Brenda, with her flimsy claims and arrogant dismissals, would have to answer to a governing body she couldn't just bully. While Tom prepared the formal petition, I did some more digging into the HOA's other access, the strip of lawn they were driving over. A quick check of the Whispering Pines development plans, specifically the landscaping and common area usage rules within their own CCRs, revealed, as suspected, that driving vehicles on landscaped common areas was strictly prohibited. They were violating their own rules to access their office because their president had illegally blocked their only legal road. The irony was exquisite. I took time-stamped photos of tire tracks on the grass leading to their back door. More fuel for the fire. Word was also starting to spread within Whispering Pines. My sympathetic neighbor, Dave, the retired engineer, had been quietly talking to other residents. The sight of 5 shipping containers wasn't exactly subtle. People were asking questions. Why is Brenda spending HOA money on renting or buying shipping containers? Did she really block that farmer lady's road? Wait, isn't that road how the landscapers get to the community center sometimes? The grumbling was growing louder. Vendors, too, were apparently having issues. The HOA's regular bottled water delivery service, their landscaping crew, even the mail carrier who sometimes used Heritage Lane for a quick turnaround, were now being inconvenienced or blocked. Brenda's fortress was starting to isolate her. The deadline for container removal passed. They remained, silent, rusty testaments to Brenda's folly. She probably thought she'd won this round. She had no idea that the real game was just beginning, and I was about to change the rules of the entire board. This wasn't just about my farm anymore. This was about making a statement that even in the fiefdom of an HOA, facts, laws, and properly filed paperwork ultimately trumped ego and entitlement. The petition to the Anytown County Planning Department was a thing of beauty. Tom, guided by my intimate knowledge of local ordinances and land use procedures, crafted a document that was both legally unassailable and incredibly persuasive. It didn't just request, it demonstrated the irrefutable case for Heritage Lane's formal status. We included copies of the original 1940s surveyor maps showing the public road stub dedication, my deeded easement, the HOA's own plat map showing Heritage Lane as their office's sole platted access, photographs of the obstruction, and even a sworn affidavit from Dave, the retired engineer, regarding the historical intent and usage of the road. We also, very pointedly, included Brenda's emailed dismissal, highlighting her false claim of multiple points of access for the HOA office. The petition requested 2 things. First, an immediate order to the Whispering Pines HOA to remove the illegal obstruction from Heritage Lane. Second, a formal review and declaration by the county affirming Heritage Lane's status, ideally recognizing its historical, albeit uncompleted, public dedication, or at the very least, as a shared private road with legally protected access rights for all properties it served, including mine and the HOA's. This second part was key. It wasn't just about getting the containers moved, it was about preventing this from ever happening again by solidifying the road's legal standing beyond any doubt or Brenda-esque interpretation. Once the petition was filed, the county wheels began to turn, slowly but inexorably. The planning department assigned a case number and a staff planner. A notice of petition was officially served to the Whispering Pines HOA, care of President Brenda Miller. I imagined her receiving this official county document, perhaps with a little less bravado than my lawyer's letter. This wasn't just me complaining anymore. This was the county government taking an official interest. Meanwhile, life on the farm had become a logistical nightmare. I had to arrange with a neighboring farmer, old Mr. Blankdottie Henderson, whose property bordered mine on the far side, to use a rough, barely there track across his back field to get my small truck in and out for essential supplies. It was muddy, slow, and added an hour to every trip, not to mention the wear and tear on my vehicle and his field, for which I compensated him. The cost of this workaround, the lost time, the potential damage to my crops from delayed planting, it all went into a spreadsheet meticulously documented for the inevitable damages claim. Brenda, however, seemed oblivious, or perhaps she was simply committed to her narrative. She was still using the lawn access to the HOA office, and I made sure to get fresh photos of the increasingly deep ruts her Escalade and other board members' vehicles were carving into what was supposed to be pristine community landscaping. I even saw a commercial landscaping truck, one clearly hired by the HOA, attempting to navigate the soggy turf, nearly getting stuck. The irony of them destroying their own common area to avoid using their legally platted, but self-obstructed, road was almost too much. Then, the county planning department scheduled a site visit. The assigned staff planner, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Albright, was known for her thoroughness. Her visit wasn't just a cursory glance. She walked Heritage Lane from the main road to my property line, then beyond my turnoff to where it dead-ended near the HOA office, right at the container wall. She had copies of all the plats and documents I'd submitted. I watched from my porch as she took measurements, made notes, and photographed everything. Brenda and Gary were there too, attempting to charm or perhaps intimidate Miss Albright. From what I could see, it wasn't working. Miss Albright had a distinctly unimpressed expression as Brenda gestured vaguely and spoke with exaggerated earnestness. Gary just looked red and agitated. A few days after the site visit, the HOA received another letter from the county. This one was a notice of violation. It cited them for two things. First, obstructing a platted access way, Heritage Lane, and second, for unpermitted vehicular access and damage to a common area, their lawn driveway. They were given 10 days to submit a remediation plan for the lawn damage, and more importantly, to remove the obstruction from Heritage Lane or face daily fines. This, I thought, would surely be the end of it. Faced with official county violations and the threat of fines, any rational entity would fold. But Brenda was not, it seemed, entirely rational. The containers remained. The 10-day deadline ticked closer. The tension in Whispering Pines was palpable. Rumors were flying. Some residents were now openly calling for a special meeting to discuss Brenda's handling of the situation and the mounting legal and potential financial exposure for the HOA. Her enablers, like Gary, were starting to look a little less confident in their public pronouncements of support. Carol, the nervous board member, was rumored to have been seen crying in the community garden. The masterstroke, as I saw it, wasn't just forcing the removal of the containers, it was the petition to formalize Heritage Lane's status. If the county sided with my interpretation of the historical plats and current necessity, Heritage Lane wouldn't just be my access, it would be the access, recognized and protected. And the HOA, including Brenda, would have no choice but to accept it. The upcoming Planning Commission hearing, where my petition would be publicly discussed, was looming. That was going to be the real showdown. Brenda thought she was fighting a farmer over a driveway. She was about to discover she was in a legal and procedural battle with an urban planner who knew the system inside and out, and who had just maneuvered her into a position where her own office's existence depended on the very road she'd tried to steal. The squeeze was on, and it was tightening with every passing day. The 10-day deadline on the county's notice of violation came and went. The 5 shipping containers still squatted defiantly across Heritage Lane. Brenda, it appeared, was going for broke, or perhaps she genuinely believed her own rhetoric that the HOA was impervious to external authority. Daily fines from the county began to accrue. I could almost hear the collective gasp from the fiscally conservative members of Whispering Pines. The real drama, however, was slated for the County Planning Commission public hearing. This was where my petition to formally clarify and affirm the status of Heritage Lane would be heard. It was my turf, professionally speaking. Tom and I prepared meticulously. We had enlarged copies of the plat maps, a concise presentation detailing the historical dedication, the continuous use, the legal basis for my easement, and, crucially, the fact that Heritage Lane provided the sole platted ingress and egress for the HOA's own office. We also had a growing dossier of the damages I was incurring and the photos of the HOA's self-inflicted lawn damage. The hearing room was surprisingly full. A good number of Whispering Pines residents had turned out, a mixture of Brenda's remaining supporters, a dwindling few looking uncomfortable, and a much larger contingent of curious, concerned, and increasingly disgruntled homeowners. Dave, the retired engineer, was there, ready to speak if needed. Miss Albright, the county planner, sat at the staff table, her comprehensive report already submitted to the commissioners. Brenda arrived with Gary in tow and a harried-looking lawyer I didn't recognize. Presumably, their previous counsel had wisely bailed or been fired for failing to anticipate this mess. Brenda was dressed in what she probably considered power attire, a slightly too bright pink suit accessorized with chunky gold jewelry. She surveyed the room with an air of strained confidence, like a queen whose subjects were showing alarming signs of independent thought. When our item was called, Miss Albright presented the staff report first. Calmly, factually, she laid out the history of Heritage Lane, its platted status, the clear language of my easement, and the undeniable fact from county records that it was the only legal access to the HOA office parcel. She recommended that the Commission affirm Heritage Lane as a recognized shared private road, order the immediate removal of the obstructions, and refer the matter of the HOA's unpermitted lawn driveway to code enforcement for further action if not immediately rectified. Her presentation was a methodical dismantling of Brenda's entire position. Then it was my turn, or rather Tom's, with me providing clarification on the urban planning aspects. Tom was brilliant, concise, professional, and utterly devastating in his logic. He didn't grandstand, he simply presented the facts, the documents, the laws. He highlighted the HOA's intransigence, their dismissal of legal notices, and the ongoing harm to my agricultural operation. When he got to the part about the HOA landlocking their own office, a ripple of murmurs went through the audience. Then Brenda's new lawyer stood up. He was clearly out of his depth, stammering about HOA autonomy and protecting common assets. He tried to paint me as an unreasonable agitator and my small farm as an industrial blight. He weakly asserted that the HOA had other ways to their office, but when pressed by one of the commissioners to provide platted proof of such legal access, he floundered. Brenda herself then demanded to speak. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Ignoring her lawyer's panicked attempts to silence her, she launched into a tirade. She accused me of trying to destroy the character of Whispering Pines. She claimed Heritage Lane was a private HOA path, directly contradicting the plats. She waved her hands, her voice rising in pitch. This is our community. We decide who uses our roads. Those containers are there to protect us from tractors and dirt. It was a spectacular implosion. Even Gary looked embarrassed. The commissioners listened patiently, their faces betraying nothing, until she wound down. Then, the chairman, a stern-looking older gentleman, leaned into his microphone. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "this commission deals with facts, plats, and ordinances. Your feelings on tractors, while noted, are not germane to the legal status of this roadway. The evidence presented by staff and the petitioner is quite clear. This road was platted for access. This easement is valid, and your HOA office, according to every official map we have, is accessible only via this road you have obstructed." The vote was unanimous. The commission formally recognized Heritage Lane as a shared private road with protected access rights for all relevant parcels. They ordered the Whispering Pines HOA to remove the shipping containers within 48 hours, under penalty of further, significantly increased daily fines, and potential direct county action to remove them at the HOA's expense. They also upheld the violation notice regarding the lawn driveway, demanding its immediate cessation and remediation. The aftermath was swift and satisfying. The next morning, a very sheepish-looking crew, not from the HOA but a professional heavy-hauling company, arrived and began the process of removing the 5 shipping containers. Brenda was nowhere to be seen. Gary watched from a distance, looking defeated. By noon, Heritage Lane was clear, the sun glinted off the gravel. It had never looked more beautiful. The fallout for Brenda was, as they say, considerable. The HOA was hit with several $1,000s in fines for the obstruction and the lawn damage. An emergency meeting of the Whispering Pines homeowners was called the following week. From what Dave later told me, it was a bloodbath. Residents, armed with copies of the county order and a summary of the unnecessary expenses Brenda had incurred, demanded her resignation. Faced with open revolt, Brenda finally, gracelessly, resigned as president and from the board. Gary slunk away shortly thereafter. Carol, the nervous one, actually found her voice and was elected interim president, tasked with repairing the damage, both physical and financial. My farm was back in business, my access secure, and now officially, undeniably recognized. And the best part? The HOA office. With their lawn driving antics shut down by the county, their only way to get to their own office, to conduct their meetings, to receive their mail, was now Heritage Lane. Every day, the HOA staff and the new board members had to drive right past my thriving farm, a constant, silent reminder of their predecessors' folly. They even had to contribute to the upkeep of the portion of Heritage Lane leading to their office, as per the shared road agreement the county helped establish. The story doesn't quite end there. The experience, as infuriating as it was, had a silver lining. It galvanized the more reasonable residents of Whispering Pines. The new HOA board, under Carol's surprisingly competent leadership, became far more transparent and rule-abiding. They even consulted me, informally of course, on a couple of minor land use questions within the development. The era of Brenda's tyranny was well and truly over. For me, it was a powerful reminder of why I chose urban planning as a career. The belief that well-understood rules and properly managed infrastructure can create better, fairer communities. And sometimes, it means you have the tools to fight back when someone tries to bulldoze over your rights with 5 shipping containers. So, if you're ever facing a seemingly insurmountable problem with a petty tyrant, remember this. Do your research, know your rights, and never underestimate the power of a well-documented plat map. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories of when bureaucracy bites back in a good way.